jumping on the stream tonight. We're getting started in just a minute, folks. Thank you for your patience. Again, I thank you all that jumped on the stream tonight. As always, I appreciate you taking the time out of your evening. I trust that everyone has had a fantastic afternoon, Saturday afternoon, and now evening. We're going to be embarking on a very serious subject that affects us in the black community in a very bad way. It affects a lot of communities, but the black community in particular, it affects our community in a huge way, in a very huge way. So we're going to be getting started in just a few minutes. Again, I thank you for your patience. Just give people a few more minutes for people to come onto the stream, and then we'll be getting started right away. If you can hear my voice clearly, put a number 1 in the chat box. If you can hear me clearly, just put a number 1 in the chat box. Thank you. Thank you, Gail. Thank you. Thank you, Althea. All right, let's get into it. Let's get into it. Okay, let's get into it. You see the subject tonight. Generation X mothers have failed their daughters. Now, when I use the term fail, for many ladies that hear the stream, this is not to, how should I say? This is not a witch hunt. This is not a witch hunt against women who have had daughters and they may not have known what to do. No, not at all. It's to bring light to the subject so that we can see why we are in the situations that we find ourselves in right now, with so many sisters that are, so many ladies, women in general, black women in particular, that find themselves unable to partner as it relates to relationships and marriage where a man is concerned. A lot of them don't even realize why they're unable to do these things, but it comes from a source. It comes from a particular place, and that's what I want to try to expose and dissect tonight. Where does it come from? Why are you seeing what you see among so many women? In general, black women in particular, why is it that you see so much single parenting and single women, period? There is a reason behind what you see. You know, it's not coming out of nowhere. It's not happening in a vacuum. These are real issues, not just in the state you live in, but these are real issues in wherever you live in the United States and even outside of the United States, amongst women in general, and again, black women in particular. These same issues are paramount in every city, every town, every state, and every country where we dominate in population. Our women are experiencing what I'm going to go over tonight. Then I wanna make it known where these issues came from, why they came, you know, and what was the stimulation behind it, what was the motive behind it, and how it adversely affected our community in particular. Because see, even though the thought and the ideas of what I'm going to discuss tonight affected many communities, none of it affected our community. None of it affected any community, I should say, as much as it affected ours. It affected ours in a very bad way. So this is what we want to talk about tonight, you know, and again, this is not a witch hunt for ladies that have daughters, and perhaps you didn't teach them correctly, or you didn't guide them correctly in the direction that would prepare them for partnering with a man, or even getting them prepared for marriage. What I found too often with this particular subject is that if you ask a woman, have you raised your daughter to become a wife? A lot of times the first thing that'll come out is, oh yeah, well, yeah, I do. And she's a very good student in school. She gets very good grades. Or, oh yeah, I am. She just graduated from college, or she just got her bachelor's degree, or she just got her master's degree. If you notice, the question didn't match the answer. The question was, are you raising your daughters to effectively partner with a man? Are you raising your daughters to effectively become wives? And then the first thing that comes out is leading with accomplishments. Now, I want you to pay attention to how that it was led with an accomplishment from the early stages. How do ladies tend to lead in their conversation now, today, in a relationship, or the potential relationship? They tend to lead with what? You've heard me say this so many different times. They tend to lead with their accomplishment, what school they went to, what college they graduated from. They tend to lead in that way. And the reason why that happens is because the societal program has told women that this is what men is attracted to. This is what we are attracted to. And truth be told, at the end of the day, men are not attracted to that. I've said it so many times. Men do not care about what school you went to. They don't care about your degrees or how many degrees you have. They don't. That's not what attracts men. They don't care about the kind of car you drive. They really don't. You do, but they don't. You care about the diploma or the degrees that you have. Men do not care about that. You care about the salary that you make or the income that you bring in, but men do not care about that. Because why don't they care? And some of you may be saying, well, why shouldn't he care? What does he want? A stupid woman? An uneducated woman? No, that's not the point. He doesn't care about that because he knows that if he is to select you as his wife, then all of your accomplishments won't matter. Why? Because if he can carry the whole load, many of you ladies, you know, you'll walk away from your career. If your income is no longer necessary, then there's no reason to hold on to a career. And if you were raised correctly as it relates to partnering with a husband or being a wife in terms of characteristics, you would know that your income is not necessary. Why? Because he's going to carry the whole load. He's going to carry the whole load. What will be the point? But here's what happened. The baby boomer era. Just follow me. And for some of you that are my age, you may not know it from its pure standpoint, but anyone who hears this stream after it's streamed live, and you represent that baby boomer era, which is those that were born between 1945 and 1964. That's the baby boomer era. That era was absolutely responsible for changing the trajectory of family life and traditional behavior as it relates to women and family and that whole domestication of household. It was changed. It was sent in a different direction. It started in the baby boomer years. The children of the baby boomers is my generation. Those that were born between 1965 and 1980. That represents Generation X. That's my generation. The generation prior to me, again, was the generation that represented the baby boomer years from 1946 to 1964. Why is those years important? Why are those years important? They're important because as the women's movement or the feminist movement began to develop as early as the late 1800s, as it progressed and moved into the early to mid 1900s, by the time it reached the early to mid 1940s, it had already began to morph into something else. What was the reason? This is all going to make sense in a minute. Just follow me. By the time it morphed into another type of movement, and it gradually morphed. This is not something that happened overnight. It was a gradual process where it began to morph from simply women wanting better rights as far as jobs and income and salary and opportunity was concerned, which I'm a complete supporter of that. But what happened? As this movement began to progress, it began to progress more and more and more. And likewise, like I've said in many streams before, this movement was never put in place to give black women any kind of rights or choice. Trust me, that's not what it was developed for. These were for middle-class white women who were arguing and pumping their fists about being discriminated against in terms of job opportunities and income. And like I've said in another previous stream, even though they were fighting for these rights, they weren't fighting for these rights to the neglect of their husbands and to the neglect of the traditional behavior of a household in terms of family and children. This is not why they were fighting for that. They weren't fighting to get rid of the family traditional structure. Not at all. They were fighting for simple human rights, basic rights to income and employment and jobs. Because there was so much discrimination going on back then as it relates to women's rights. They weren't allowed to vote at a certain point. You know, these were not black men suppressing or oppressing their women. These were white men that were suppressing and oppressing their women. Okay? So they stood up and protest to get some of the rights and privileges and equality treatment, equal treatment that they saw men being given in the society. How did this morph and change into what became later a bad idea where our community was concerned? As this movement began to progress more and more and more, and it moved into the era of the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement, which you know began to explode in the 60s, where it was black people now fighting for equal rights, fighting for equal pay, fighting for jobs, fighting for the right to be included. We were fighting for inclusion because we were under the system of Jim Crow and segregation, which separated us, you know, from lunch counters and public transportation, and we were just being excluded and not being treated equal, in fact, because we weren't really considered full-blown citizens. So you see what happened here, right? If you pay attention, here was the women's movement, which morphed into something else, trickled over into the civil rights movement. Now you have two marginalized groups who were fighting for what? Equality. Without definition. One side was fighting for equality because of being discriminated against because of their color, because of their ethnicity. They were being blocked and guarded and pushed away from job opportunities and pay and everything, all right? And then you had another movement over here that was fighting for equality, but yet that equality had nothing to do with the black struggle. It had everything to do with middle-class white women who wanted to be included with equal pay and being basically treated as a citizen, but this discrimination was not being being imposed upon them by anyone except their own men. The government that we live in, which was ran and ruled as it is today by white men. So they were being oppressed. They wanted equality. So now you got two groups again that want equality. So one group wanting equality and the other group wanting equality, both causes, none of those two qualities reflected the same ideals, but yet it's that one word, equality, that caused them to join. And as those two groups joined, the ideals and the idea of separating themselves in terms of women wanting to be separated from the male-dominated, what's called patriarchy, which they felt was pushing them away from equality, pushing them away from opportunities, not giving them the opportunity that was given to the men at that time. You see how these two groups can find some kindred cause, right? Even though there was no kindred cause. Women in that group began to then unite with women in the civil rights movement who were also black. And then the whole idea of independence and self-independence, be strong, and the whole idea of being a domesticated wife began to become demonized. I touched on this in a previous stream a few weeks or about a month or so back, but this is what caused it. I'm going to get right to what the subject title is tonight. Just walk with me. As this idea became more and more prominent during the civil rights movement, and it began to grow in number and in mass and in popularity, what was then the women's empowerment movement, which now today we know as the feminist movement, it began to basically in some ways eclipse the whole civil rights movement, to where now this was the main idea. So then as it moved into the late 60s, early 70s, you had this free sex movement. That's when we had groups back then called like Woodstock, where they was all about this free sex thing. And then you had birth control was also introduced shortly thereafter. Then you had Roe versus Wade. Now, these movements gave a certain level of independence, at least that's what was perceived, to women in general. Because now with birth control, you could prevent unwanted pregnancy. Whereas opposed to before, there was no birth control. There were no condoms. There was no way to prevent pregnancy. So women had children, and during that time these were large families. It wasn't uncommon to see white families with a large number of children. It wasn't uncommon. It also wasn't uncommon to see black families with large numbers of children. That's why some of you, if you know, you have family members right now where you've heard when they said, oh, they had 16 children or 17 children and 15 children. That's coming from that era, before the whole birth control, Roe versus Wade system was in place. There was an idea of family. As this movement, just walk with me, as this movement began to progress and mature during the civil rights movement, it began to penetrate the black community in large numbers, in a large way. As it began to penetrate, this whole idea of independence, this whole idea of us against the male patriarchy, us, meaning women, against the male-dominated patriarchy, which is, they're designed to hold us back. They're keeping us back. They don't want us to progress. They don't want us to succeed. It's these men that's blocking us and stopping us. But see, black women had no dog in that fight, because we were being blocked already anyway. Men and women in the black community, we were both being blocked. So we really didn't have a dog in the fight in terms of that argument, because we already were being blocked. We had already come accustomed to the whole lifestyle of being discriminated against and of being blocked and being told that we couldn't come into this store or to that restaurant or come into this town or drink from that water fountain. We had already become accustomed to being treated that way, and as a result, we had developed our own businesses. Some of you remember or learned about what was called Black Wall Street. These kind of environments, these kind of communities came about during that period of time where we as a people were being discriminated against. But where in the hell did the women's movement have anything to do with the civil rights movement as it related to Jim Crow, us being segregated against, us being discriminated against, us being water hosed down, dogs sicked on us? We had a whole entirely different fight. Ladies, black women, this fight wasn't yours, but you bought into it, hook, line, and sinker. And as a result, the baby boomers born between 1945 and 1964, who caught the end crest of that resurgence, that insurgence of that movement, and then it trickled over again into the civil rights movement. You begin to teach your daughters, which is my generation, you begin to teach your daughters to be independent, to be strong, and to get an education so you don't have to depend on a man, i.e. this male-dominated patriarchy, which is only focused at keeping us, black women, back, keeping us pressed down, keeping us away from opportunity, keeping us away from excelling and being the best versions of ourselves. It's this male-dominated patriarchy that we need to protect ourselves against. This is the thought process, ladies. This is the thought process that was being painted in the minds of black women that came up during that time. What happened? As a result, black women became kind of offended with the whole idea of submitting to a man. Over time, the whole idea of family and the domestication of taking care of home and taking care of children and, you know, being there to serve her husband, that whole idea began to get less and less popularity in our community. And then the whole driving thought was, Make yourself so independent. Make yourself so secure. Make yourself so knowledgeable and financially astute to the point where you don't need to depend on a man. As if depending on a man. I mean, after all, if you're going to depend on a man, should he not be your husband? Should he not be your husband? I didn't say depend on any man, but depend on the man that you know you intend to live your life with, to take you and him to the end of life. Should that not be a good idea? See, they made the whole word depend such a bad word. They made it bad like they made submission a bad word, or submissive a bad word. When submissive only simply means to agree, or to cooperate, or to be cooperative with your husband. That's all submissive means, you know. It's not submissive in the sense of a slave versus a slave master. It's not that kind of submissive, but that's what they made you believe it was. So that's why the word is so toxic right now. If you say that to a woman, she almost regurgitates just with the term, because she doesn't understand it, because it's been told from a negative connotation and not from the positive denotation of the word. Submissive simply means to agree or to be cooperative. That's all. That's what you do when you go to work. You're submissive to your boss. You're submissive to your job title. You're submissive every day to your career path. You're submissive to the dean. You're submissive to your professor in college. That's the only way you can graduate successfully. You had to be submissive. You had to submit yourself to the syllabus or the curriculum that he was teaching. And likewise, when you go to work, you have to also submit yourself to the core values of the company, or what it is that that company is expecting of you. That's how you got the results that you get, right, from college. And that's how you get the results that you get when you go to work. You get it by being able to submit or be cooperative. So how did this hurt us today? Well, we can easily see that something very destructive is taking place. I've always said, and I'll continue to put these stats out, 1 in 3 today, according to updated stats today, 1 in 4 will marry in a lifetime. In the black community, that means 3 of our women will die alone. Now, is that true? Yes, it is. But why is that true? Why are those stats factual? It's because of the narrative that's been painted that you heard me say previously. Most young ladies, most of our women, they're not taught to be wives. Not at all. They're sold to the whole idea that to be independent and to simply do you and get a job and build your bank account and all this kind of stuff, to prepare yourself, and in essence what you're saying is to protect yourself in the event that if you do meet a man and it doesn't go right, it doesn't go well, that you'll be okay. That's what's taught. So there's black women in particular, women in general, have been taught to fear men. To fear them, not to trust them, but to fear them. And to always keep yourself on guard, because at the end of the day, it's us against them. So when you have that us against them mentality, it makes it very difficult for you to be a wife. Because when you do partner up, under that kind of thought process, you think you're equal to the husband that you're with. You think you're equal to the husband you're with. So you kind of try to you stay in competition with your own men. And being in competition with your own men who are built and wired by nature to protect you and to provide, it puts you at a disadvantage, because when you come with that kind of energy, which again stems from what I said previously, when you come with that kind of energy, it's a turn off. So what happens now? What do you find now in most hookups, most situations where a man and a woman comes together in our community, in a lot of communities, but I'm speaking on mine in particular. When you find them coming together, they have a lot of sex. Oh yeah, they stay together, Children may come into existence as a result, but it never leads to real meaningful marriage. And the idea now is, well, what's the point of doing the paperwork? We're already here. If it's not broke, why fix it? I've heard these conversations. If it's broke, why fix it? You know, that comes from that same thought process. The whole idea, the whole domestication, the traditional ideals of family and marriage have been pretty much today made obsolete. It's not important anymore. People simply don't find it necessary now. Let's just stay together and hook up. And you can't really blame a lot of people who are against it, because you got to look at where this whole idea has totally perverted the whole concept of marriage and traditional family, how it has perverted it. And why can't you blame them? Well, okay, let's take an example. You get married. A man gets married. He comes in successful. The marriage doesn't work. And what happens? This system says that the lady, the woman, can take everything that he has. Or she can continue taking him to court and taking more and more and more of what he has, until finally leaving him in some cases with nothing. But he came into the marriage with something. She leaves with everything. He leaves with nothing. All because of what? Because the marriage didn't work. So you can see where the fear, even from the man's side, comes to where he doesn't want to be married. But where did this perversion come from? How is it destroyed, the whole idea and the concept of marriage, to where now men and women on both sides, they're afraid, that they're scared to death just to even embark on the idea of getting married. It sounds like a good idea, but then they start thinking, if you're a six-figure income earner and you're a man, which puts you in the top 10% of income earners, and it took you years to develop that kind of income, and now you find yourself 35, 40, and 45 years of age, and men reach the peak of their success financially at about 45 to 50 years of age. And now you find yourself there, and then here's your proposition now to get married. It doesn't sound that appealing when you've watched so many other examples, either in your own personal life from friends, family members, all right, that have gone through it, and you've watched them lose everything. So for men, it looks like a lose-lose situation if they've become successful. And for men who are not within that 15 and 10% of money earners, we're talking about the average income earners, black men, like I said in other streams as well, $41,000 to $42,000 a year for a lifetime. That's the average income for a black man in this country. The average income for a black woman in this country is at its lowest point, $27,000, at its midpoint, $35,000, and at its highest point, about $40,000 a year. Very few black women make above that. Only 6% earn $100,000 or more in this country. Only 6%. So that's a very small number, which tells you, for the most part, the majority of our people, we are in the average income brackets. And that's okay. That's okay. But even in the average income brackets, the idea of the whole narrative and concept of the feminist movement and the women's empowerment movement that made domesticated lifestyles in terms of a woman serving her man or being submissive in a relationship has been all but perverted and obliterated, even on the average level. So you still can't find the good results, even on the average level. But just prior to 1970, we had an 80% marriage rate in the black community. 80%. That's before the movement took full hold of our community. So why do I say Generation X has failed their daughters? Because Generation X, again, reflects my generation. This generation, those that are in their 50s. Generation X, again, ranges from 1965 to 1980. That's what reflects the Generation X era. That's us. Our parents taught us taught you, ladies, to be independent. Now, it's one thing to tell the story about the problem, and it's another thing to give some solutions. So if any of you are asking, well, okay, Charles, what's the solution? Well, that's a good question. It's going to take a lot of work because it took a lot of years to get us to this place. It took a lot of years, and it's going to take equally a lot of years to get us out of it. But as we learn to get out of it, ladies, as you pick up the tools to get out of it, it's going to be a lot of casualties of war between now and the time we see some real effective change in the community. It's going to be a lot of casualties. Unfortunately, many women in our community are going to simply die before they even get to see the results. They're going to die by themselves, and that's unfortunate, but that's just the reality. And so what's the solution? Well, first of all, for this era, for now, for those of you ladies who are single and you want or desire to be married, you desire to be in a relationship, here's what you have to do. One, first, if you have bad experiences in the past, get some therapy first. The second thing you want to do after you complete your period of therapy is you want to start asking men, what do they want? Because what do they want today is pretty much the same thing men have wanted even yesterday. Men have not changed for the most part. I'm not talking about the ones that are completely out of control. I'm not talking about them. That's your Pookies and your Nug Nugs and Tim Tims that you heard me mention before in previous streams. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about men that really do want relationship. And trust me, there's a lot of men in this country, believe it or not, ladies, against the lie that's told. There are no good men. That's a lie. 51% of black men in this country are single and childless, and 64% sit in the middle class. 80% of all black men in this country desire to be in partnership and marriage with you. But the problem is the program that's been embedded in the back of the brain of most of our women in our communities to where they don't need a man. It makes it very difficult. That's why you see a lot of black men, they move off and they marry a white woman, which me personally, I don't have an issue with interracial anything. Of course, my priority is to my own community, absolutely. But I'm not against it because I will never tell a man to die alone, to wait for a black woman to get it together. I would never say that. That's not good advice. Absolutely not. Just like if it was in reverse, I'm not going to tell you ladies that are marriage-minded, that really want a husband, and you know how to be a wife because you were raised to be a wife. I'm not going to tell you to wait, to look for the black man that knows, that got his stuff together. What I am helping you understand, though, is that if you are marriage-minded, and if you are that woman I just described, you got a 51% chance. Because, again, 51% of black men in this country are single and childless. And 64% sit in the middle class. Now you have to determine what is it exactly do you want. Because many of you ladies, your expectations are way up here, but you qualify right here. But your expectations way up here, but you qualify right here. So you have to get level set as to where your expectations are. And that I believe is the solution. Getting level set is what will get you the outcomes that you say you want. In spite of the fact that this generation has been lied to. You ladies have been lied to. And as a result, you've been set on a course for failure as it relates to relationships. This is why you don't see the value in the same black man that you're looking for. There's a low level of disrespect for black men amongst black women in this country. That's a fact. And that is a fact. That is a fact. And many of you don't even know where it came from because it's a subconscious program. You don't even know where it came from. You just react. And this is how it comes out. That's why when you get in a relationship, you overtalk. That's why you get in relationships, you're argumentative, you're combative, you go back and forth, because you've never been taught the importance of the men that you have in your life. I'm not talking about your bad experience. I'm talking about the men, period. We're the only nationality in the world, black community. We're the only group of people in the world who don't see the real value in the men that they have. It's because we've been taught differently in this country. You have been taught differently in this country. Remember what I said? If you've seen any of my past streams, I've always said, I said feminism is a first world problem. It's a first world problem. See, because in other countries, third world, second world, they don't have the time to deal with the first world issues that we have in terms of feminism. They don't have the time. For them, it's about survival. And they see the men in their society as an important role in terms of infrastructure and building and safety and protection. They see that value. They know that value. It's inherent inside of them. So their programming is very different. They were programmed to be wives. They were programmed to cooperate with a man. They see that they still hold the value of their men. And I'm gonna give you an example that you can see right in front of your face. In your communities, when you go up and down the street, don't you see the Spanish community outside? These are men early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. They're on the corner. What are they waiting for? They're waiting for that bus or that van to pick them up, just to give them work for 1 day, 2 days. That's it. And they still go back home to their wives, and the respect level never drops. Why is that? It never drops. They don't make any money. Hardly any money. But the respect level never drops. Because unlike this society, men, when they're born into other societies, they automatically have, they're automatically looked at as leadership. Even when they're young, they're still looked at as leadership. That's why you've heard in some countries, black men, once they reach the age of 16, they're considered adult men. And they're treated as such. It's a different mentality, a different whole concept and thought process. But what has happened here? What has happened here? In general, amongst all families, but in particular our families, where black women do not see the value any longer in their own men. In most cases, in a lot of cases, a black woman, she'd be willing to live alone by herself if she can't get all the boxes checked off. Meaning he has to be a certain height, he has to be a certain, make a certain income, he has to be this. I mean, just checking off the boxes. If he can't check off those boxes, a lot of women in our community, they would rather simply be by themselves. And then they hold to the old stupid cliche of, I can do bad all by myself. And like I've always said, you will do bad all by yourself. I promise you that. In fact, you won't do bad all by yourself. You'll do worse by yourself, because it takes two incomes. It takes two incomes. Unless you're extremely wealthy, two incomes. And if you don't want two incomes with him, you're going to have to live in a group. And I've talked about what group compound living is. So you see with what I explained so far, how Generation X has failed their daughters. Because now their daughters are moving about and they're young. And they believe the way they're moving, that they've gotten good advice. They believe that what they were told and what they were taught from their mothers, that it's what they should be doing. They believe that the advice is to their best interest. And I'm gonna tell you something, ladies that you have daughters and you're Generation X, I know you didn't mean to do it. Again, like I said in the beginning of the stream, it's not a witch hunt. It's just to bring light to a real issue that's happening right in our own community that we see every single day. And many of you have daughters. Whether you're watching the stream now live or whether you watch it after the stream is over in the replay, you have daughters. What are you teaching your daughter right now? Right now. What are you teaching her? Go to school, girl. Get an education. Make sure you stack your money. Do you. Don't you put yourself in a position where you're relying on no man. You make sure you're independent. And don't you even think, you enjoy your young years from 22, because most young ladies, you're out of college by 22. So you enjoy your young years from 22, and girl, don't you even think about getting married until you hit at least 30 to 35 years of age. That is horrible advice. Horrible advice. Oh my God. And that advice alone is what has most of our women in every black community single, and on their way to dying alone. I mean, think of it. You tell your daughter, don't think about getting married till you at least 30, 35. Really? That's good advice? Most women that's been alive, you've been to a gynecologist more than once in your life. Many times. You know 35 is geriatric pregnancy. You know it. Why would you tell your daughter, go ahead, girl, enjoy your young years. You're only going to live once. So they ride the carousel. For years, they ride the carousel. Right? Running up their body count. To only get to 30 and 35 and then decide, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to get serious now. And then they think they can go outside and look at a tree and pull a man off one of them. Really? That's good advice? That's horrible advice. Horrible advice. And it's setting them up to be single and to potentially die alone. That's what's so serious about the topic tonight. And I know some of you don't want to hear these kind of topics, but it's the topics that you do want to hear that's not helping you. It's the topics that you enjoy listening to that's not doing anything for you. It's the ones you find uncomfortable to listen to that you probably should sit still and take a few deep breaths and actually listen to, because what always sounds good is not good. What always tastes good is not good. These talking points are designed to get better results. Again, like I've always said, we're better together than we are apart. I want to see something different outside. I don't know what you want to see, but I know for certain all of us who have children, ladies, you who have daughters, you're going to age. If you're not teaching them right, you better get serious about, and you better come to terms. If you don't want to change the story and what you've already said to them, admit that you were wrong in what you said and redirect them in a different direction, then you're responsible for the direction that they take. At that point, they're depending on you for the advice. What girl does not listen to her mother's advice? Most hang on to every word you say. And not only do they hang on to every word you say, but they watch everything you do and how you do it. How you interact with men, they're logging it inside their database. How you talk, they're logging it in their database. All you're looking at when you see your daughter is a carbon copy of yourself. If you were not a wife and you didn't get the right results, don't you want better results for your daughter? I just told you, Generation X mothers failed their daughters. Do you want to fit into that definition? Or do you want to do something different? We are better together than we are apart. I hope this conversation, talking point tonight, helped. Again, we can't always have entertainment stuff going on for us to be, we're like kids sometimes as adults. We just want to be entertained all the time, right? Just want to be entertained. Serious topics we tend to run away from. Serious subjects we tend to flee. Oh no, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear that. Give me the fun stuff. Give me the fun talking, the fun conversations. Give me that. Give me something stupid. Give me something that's going to turn my brain off. That way I don't have to think. Don't give me a subject that's going to hold me accountable for something. I don't want to hear that. And therein lies the problem. Therein lies the problem. Because we can look outside, whatever town you live in, whatever state, whatever part of the world in the United States you live in, and even outside of the United States, we can look outside and see that we don't want to hear what's going to help us change. It's clear and it's evident right in front of our eyes that we run from subjects that make us feel uncomfortable. But we got to change. We got to get a different outcome. And as a result, in getting different outcomes, it's going to require us to sit in an uncomfortable place for a period of time so that necessary changes can take place. We have to rewire the thinking of our women in our communities. All of us have to be rewired for sure. But I'm talking to you tonight, ladies. You have to be rewired and start seeing the value that was by nature meant to be. And that was you with me and me with you. Then you got to figure out, how do we do that in a meaningful, healthy kind of way? It's up to the older generation to teach the women. And for those of you that are Christian, and again, I do this because I am a Christian, but this is not a Christian channel. This is, put it this way, it's not a religious channel. I put it that way. But those of you that have a Bible sitting in your house, go to Titus, 2nd chapter 3 through 5. Titus, 2nd chapter 3 through 5. Read it. It deals with everything I'm saying tonight. And with that being said, I thank you all that got on the stream tonight. I am your host, Charles Chalmers. This is another episode of Let's Talk About It. Shout out to Althea. Thank you for coming on the stream tonight. Shout out to Margaret. Shout out to Valita Wilson. Thank you for getting on the stream tonight. Valita, you know, I think I want to respond to some statements that's in the comment before I close out. Valita Wilson. Valita Wilson said the baby boomers had to deal with welfare, the impact of men not being allowed to live in the household with their families. Wow. Let me go back to that comment. Okay. She said, Valita Wilson, she said the baby boomers had to deal with welfare and the impact of men not being allowed to live in the household with their families, and black women had to raise children alone in ghetto environments. Men and women both had to deal with living in separate, violent communities. I believe that word is. That's interesting. Okay. Well, I'll say this. That's partly correct, Valita. There is some truth in what you said. That's a great comment. But I will say this. It wasn't that the men were not allowed to stay in the home with the families. Under the ideology of the women's movement and what later became known as the feminist movement, which is what has morphed into this whole distorted idea now of independence. I am woman, watch me roar. Black women no longer regarded the value of the whole domesticated idea. So what they began to do under that movement, they began to push their men out the door. It's not that the government pulled the men out the door. Our women pushed us out the door during the resurgence of that movement. So you said a lot that was right, but that particular point is the only thing I disagree with. But that's a great question. That's a great statement that you put in there. Let me see what else you said. This is another comment that Valita Wilson said. She said birth control was used to control the population, and look at what's happening now. White women are not producing to ensure the life of their people. In fact, she said, at this rate, They all will not exist in 30 years. Wow. That's why Roe versus Wade has been overturned. Has been overturned, and abortion is illegal. Whoa. You know what, Valita? There's more truth to that statement. I don't want to go in depth with that, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It's called the population scale. When it reaches like, I forget, like 1.2% or something like that, that's when, I'll put it this way, what Valita is saying here, if for those of you that listen and don't understand really what she meant right there, the whole Roe versus Wade and the birth control becoming illegal was more about maintaining the population levels in the country. When population levels drop below production requirements, that's the beginnings of the collapse of government. Oh man, Valita, that's a whole nother topic, man. That was a great, that was a great thing to drop in there. Wow. That's a whole nother topic. Valita, keep coming on the stream. Keep coming on the stream. That was awesome. Thank you for that comment. Valita has another one. Black women now are the most success education business owners in the world. That's not true. Now that I disagree with. I'm gonna tell you what the reality of that is. Black women are the most enrolled. The most enrolled in college, but certainly not the most educated. I mentioned during the course of my stream, 6% of the entire population of black women in this country, 6%, make over 100,000 or more. That's all, just 6%. 80 to 85% make, at its lowest point, 27,000, at its midpoint, 35,000, and at its highest point, 40,000. Now you have some variables that creep just above average. We're talking about 50, 55, and 60, $70,000 a year. But for the most part, it's not what's being told. Black men and black women, we sit really very close to one another in terms of the income, the gross median income in this country. It's only a very small percentage. Only 10% of black men make $100,000 or more. That's it, 10%. 5% make just above that, and if I go higher, now you're talking about 1%, 0.1%, almost non-existent, you know. But when we're talking about 80%, this is where the problem comes in our community. We're looking, a lot of you ladies are looking for the guy that's at the 10% level, the 5% level, the 2% level, and it's okay for you to want that, but can you get that? Especially if you were never taught to be a wife. Because what do men in those levels want? What kind of wife do they want? Men that live on that level, they want a woman that's already a wife, not one that they have to groom into becoming one. See? A wife is fit, feminine, cooperative, friendly, easy to get along with. I mean, easy to get along with. She's a good experience for a man. She gives that man peace. She's a place of peace for him. That's a wife. She's a place of peace for him. When he comes from outside, inhale, when he gets around her, she can relax his whole soul, his whole spirit, his mind, everything. He can rest easy in her femininity because she rests easy in her femininity. But if you're loud, if you're combative, highly opinionated, uncooperative, confrontational, overtalk your man. When the man, you don't respect, the respect level is so low that you overtalk when he's talking. If you're that, if those are the traits that a woman has, the guy up here, he don't want no part of that. He wants no part of that. You're talking about a man who has a 16-hour day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on the weekend. He has a 16, 17, and 18-hour day to get to the income that he's at. He don't have time for anything else except peace. Now, you got the guy who does 40 hours a week. That's your average dude, and that's okay. But even with him, he still wants, inherently, a man wants. He wants fit, feminine, friendly, cooperative, non-combative, non-over-talking, non-confrontational. That's what every man wants. He wants, even with you on an average level, he still wants a place of peace with you. But in our community, we can see that that doesn't exist. You can rarely find it. You can rarely find it. So many of our ladies are very confrontational, God knows, and loud, argumentative, combative, over-talk your man like woof, like crazy, insulting, use shaming tactics, guilt tactics, the need to be right in conversation. Really an unpleasant experience, very unpleasant experience. And what happens as a result is, since every woman comes standard with the same body parts, and you know what I'm saying, he'll have sex with you, but you're not a good experience. So as a result of that bad experience, children come into birth. And ultimately what happens? He leaves. He leaves. Every man wants the same thing. Whether he's here or whether he's here, he still wants peace. But can he get it? Can he get it? Or has this narrative, this idea, this women's empowerment, I am woman, watch me roar, I'ma do me, and all this kind of stuff. Has this mentality even trickled down into the average community amongst us? Absolutely it has. And has it reached into the above average community among our people? Absolutely it has. And has it reached and touched women in general? Yes, it has. Yes, it has. That's why 80% of all divorces in the black community are filed by black women. 80% of all engagements are called off by black women. If you ask any woman in any relationship, if it ended, who called it off, 99% of the time, you're going to hear her say, I did. And then what comes behind it is all the stuff he did as why she called it off. Well, think about it, ladies. How can 80% on both sides, be it divorce or be it engagements being called off, how can 80% of every single dissolving of marriage, every single calling off of engagements be the man's fault? Really? You know, that looks like to me a symptom of non-accountability. Our women have been poisoned by this thought process that I talked about during the course of this whole stream. Generation X has failed their daughters and lied to them and made them incapable of partnering effectively in a meaningful way with a man. There's a low level of disrespect amongst black women as when it comes to black men. There's a low level of disrespect. That's a fact. Many of you, you know your mothers were not married successfully. You know it. I know you may say something your father did, I know, but you know what I'm saying. Your aunt wasn't successfully married either. Neither was your other 3-4 aunts. And you have cousins, females, unsuccessful. How can everybody be unsuccessful and not be, it's never an issue where the woman is concerned? How is that? That's impossible. That doesn't make any sense. We have to get to the point not only to take accountability, but also understand that we've also been falsely taught. You've been taught wrong. You've been taught wrong, ladies. You've been lied to. We have to get to you have to get to the place where you realize you've been lied to. We start looking at one another as if there's value in each other. We're better together than we are apart. We already see the collateral damage when we're not together. We see the collateral damage, and who suffers the most is the children that we produce during this dysfunction. Men control relationships, and men control marriage. You control access to your body and childbirth. If those two things are true, and they are, don't you think it's important that we get to the bottom of the problem? Really, to the bottom of it. Stop making excuses. Stop throwing it off on the men. Life is about choices and trade-offs. Life is about choices and trade-offs. So we have to get to the point where we can begin to see the value in community, see the value in family, see the value in us staying together. Staying together. Staying together. I didn't say hooking up. Staying together. So that we can get to the end of life. Since we're all going to get there, let's get to the end of life together. That makes more sense, right? That makes more sense. Let me see if we got any more questions before I close out. Valida, that was a good. I understand where you're coming from with that question. That's not an uncommon understanding or belief. That's not an uncommon understanding. Most ladies believe that. I've heard that so many times, but it's simply not true. It's just not true. But most believe that. This has been good. Thank you for the participation. Thank you, Margaret, for getting on the line tonight. Thank you, Gail. Abdul, thank you, Valida. You made this very interesting with your comments. Appreciate you. Make sure you keep getting on the line with us. I'm coming on again Monday night at 9 o'clock. Althea, thank you for getting on the line tonight. With that being said, I am your host. This time we are going saying goodnight. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, folks. Think on some of the topics that you've heard. Think on it. Do some research yourself. See what you come up with. With that being said, I'm your host again. Thank you again for getting on the line tonight. And we are out. See you Monday at 9 p.m. Tell somebody so they can come with you. All right? Have a good night, folks.